They're still figuring out their own unique styles, so we're still copying European styles. Specifically, that clock tower is modeled after a cathedral in Sevilla, Spain, called La Giralda. So it's an office building made to look like a cathedral. If you're a baseball fan, you might recognize the name Wrigley Field, where the Chicago Cubs play is named for the same company. This is originally their offices. The Wrigley Company started off as a soap and baking powder company. One time they did a promotion where they included a free stick of chewing gum with every purchase. The gum was so popular, they just became a chewing gum company. This was their original offices. Today in the Wrigley Building, you'll find a Lou Malnati's deep dish pizza restaurant, as well as a Gear Deli's if you're looking for an ice cream sundae on a warm day like today. As we get a little closer, notice how the bottom of the Wrigley Building is a slightly darker shade of gray. As you work your way up that clock tower, there's fewer and fewer dark gray spots. It gets lighter as you go up. And that's intentional. The idea is to draw your eye upwards. When they did that, the outside of the Wrigley Building is actually tiled. See those tiles? It's covered in more than 250,000 enameled terracotta tiles, which gives it that lovely color gradient, getting lighter as you go up. And those tiles also make the Wrigley Building more fireproof. Fire is a big part of Chicago's history. We'll talk more about the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 later on in the tour. We're going under Michigan Avenue. A lot of famous shops and restaurants. The one that's called the Magnificent Mile, but it's a minute walk that way. It's the world's largest Starbucks. Oh, sorry, that was my mom. After this bridge, we'll take a look at the second tallest building in Chicago. Straight ahead, the Trump International Hotel and Towers from 2009. Trump Tower, second tallest building in Chicago. Notice that it has three horizontal gray strips going across it, a place where the building gets narrower. Every time the building gets narrower, it's called a setback. And their heights are no coincidence. That lowest setback's the same height as the roof of the Wrigley Building. To your right, it's 2009, saying hello to 1924. It's a great example of a modern style called contextualism, as in context, ways for buildings to flow with the context around. In this case, the height of each of those three setbacks corresponds to the height of a different older building nearby. Trump Tower was designed by a Chicago architect, Adrian Smith, also known as the world's tallest architect, because he designed the tallest building in the world, Burj Khalifa in Dubai. To help picture the tallest building in the world, picture two of Trump Tower stacked on top of each other. About twice the height of Trump Tower. It's about the height of the tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa. Same architect, Adrian Smith, right here in Chicago. Head on the left, one of my favorites is this stone building with the short towers in the corners, the round dome in the middle, the Jewelers Building, 1926. Love the detail on the dome up top there. The Jewelers Building used to be a lot of jewelry companies in there. In the 1920s, those were Al Capone's days, a lot of organized crime, gangsters. So if a jeweler was worried about getting robbed, they did not have to leave their car, because the Jewelers Building had an automobile elevator. You could drive your car with your jewelry into the building. They'd take you and your vehicle and your jewelry up to any of the 27 floors. Have you seen the movie Batman Begins? Batman spent some time in front of one of those corner towers on the Jewelers Building. Let's go to the 1960s. Coming up on the right, two of the most photographed buildings on the river. These two round, white, corn-cob-shaped towers are the Marina City Towers, 1968. Their architect Richard Goldberg said there's no straight lines or sharp corners in nature, therefore a building should have none. And so he did this round, natural design. Goldberg's goal was to create a city within a city. You could live in your apartment above, park your car in the garage below, dine in the restaurants below that. There was an ice skating rink, a bowling alley, a laundromat. Today the House of Blues is in there, a music venue. You could even park your boat in the marina underneath. At the time these were built in the 1960s, the river was still very industrial. A lot more factories. It was smelly. Not a lot of people wanted to live right by the river. So since these were some of the first big residential buildings on the Chicago River, they had to include anything its residents could possibly want, a city within a city. See the cars in the parking garage in the bottom there? You have to be a professional valet to park there. They don't let just anyone back up to the ledge. There have been some famous movie stunts. They've driven cars off Marina City into the river, including a Steve McQueen movie and an Allstate commercial. Let's do another one from 1968. On your left, the shorter concrete building with the gold 5.5 at the top is 55 West Wacker, also from 1968, but a very different style called brutalism. The late 60s were a tumultuous time, and certain businesses and institutions wanted to convey a sense of stability and authority, so they built these fortress-like buildings with exposed concrete and small inset windows. Brutalism came and went pretty quickly in the late 60s. It's a style you'll see in a lot of government buildings, university campuses, and libraries. For contrast to the heavy fortress, the next one on the left will be an elegant glass skyscraper. Let's follow these white granite columns all the way to the roof. You see the roof looks like an ancient Greek temple. Kind of looks like the Parthenon in Athens, stretched out into a glass skyscraper. This is 77 West Wacker, a style called neoclassical. It's a new take on classical ancient Greek design. Pretty cool from a time perspective. We're here in 2025, looking at a building from 1892, which is itself a reference all the way back to ancient Greece. Feel free to take as many pictures as you like. It is a perfect day for a boat ride. Do me a favor, let's mostly take pictures from our seat, so we're not blocking anyone's view. We're standing up. But also near the end of the tour, when we're out by Navy Pier, I'll give you a nice long photo break. That'll be the best time for any standing group photos. We'll finish up the tour at the same place where we started. The tour is about 75 minutes long. All along beside us on the left, you see people enjoying the Chicago River Walk on this beautiful day. The River Walk was built in the early 2000s and it cost $112 million. Each section of the River Walk between the various sets of bridges is called a room. Each room has its own unique style. The room to our left right now is known as the River Theater, named for those steps like you have in ancient amphitheater. The idea of having a river walk on the Chicago River dates back to 1909, part of a long-term plan for the whole city called the Burnham Plan by an architect named Daniel Burnham. That plan is also a big reason we have our public access lakefront, all those parks and beaches along Lake Michigan, instead of private developments. And the great feature of the Burnham Plan, a plan made for the whole city, all the way back in 1909. If you got kids who are looking to cool off, kids can play in those fountains right there to your left where it says Sweet Home Gelato. And right behind it, that wide stone building is the Builders Building. This one was built in two sections. The wide section on the left, called the Straight Pillars, is from 1827. The narrow section on the right with the dark bay windows that stick out was added on in 1986. It's nearly 60-year time jump. All within one building, the Builders Building. Similar time out with this next bridge. The Wells Street Bridge was originally built in the 1920s and was replaced. It's an exact replica in 2013. This looks like one of our historic bridges, but it's relatively new. The average age of our downtown bridges is 85 years old. The oldest one is 112 years old, and they can all still lift. We'll talk more about how they do that in just a minute. Now, in the late 1920s, the Roaring Twenties, a new style emerged called Art Deco. A great example of Art Deco is this huge stone building here from 1929, the Merchandise Mart. This Art Deco style is all about optimism in our machine-made future. You get that sense of optimism from all the straight-line columns all the way up, just like a Felt Weaver on the way up. There's a machine feeling to it, a lot of repetitive patterns of the arrows and the trim. The gold squares at regular intervals feels like something off of an assembly line. Closer to the river, see the row of statue heads. Those 8 bronze busts were added in the 1950s by Joseph Kennedy, father of former President John F. Kennedy. The Kennedys owned the Merchandise Mart for many years. Those 8 bronze busts are what's called the Merchant Princes, being Chicago businessmen, including the founders of Sears and Marshall Field, for whom the Field Museum of Natural History is named. We'll talk more about the Merchandise Mart on the way back, how big it is, what they used it for. But for now, eyes up, cameras up. After this bridge, we're about to have one of my favorite views on the tour. We're approaching the junction of the 3 branches of the Chicago River. A lot of our newest skyscrapers have been built right here. If you took this tour maybe 10, 15 years ago, you would have been looking at a lot more parking lots. Today, you're looking at Chicago's trophy case. Welcome to Wolf Point. If I'm in the front of your picture, I'll try to make it look like I was really guiding it up. This is Wolf Point. It's the junction of the 3 branches of the Chicago River. We are leaving the main branch. We'll do a quick trip up the north branch of the Chicago River to our right. Then we'll turn around and have a way down the south branch of the Chicago River to our left. We will see the Willis Tower on the way back. On your right, one of the newest additions to our skyline, Wolf Point South, also known as Salesforce Tower, a brand new office building, just popped up in the last couple of years. This is my 4th year working on the river. I started working here. That was a parking lot. The buildings. Straight ahead with the big gray arch at the bottom is River Point from 2017. That gray arch is a rain gutter for the front face of the building. River Point has an unusual foundation. It's built directly above active Amtrak and Metro train lines. If you look at the wall below it, there's circles in that wall. Those are vents. There's fans spinning in there, letting air out from the trains that run right underneath River Point. Right next to Salesforce Tower, this dark green building is Wolf Point West, an apartment building from 2016. Most of the buildings we'll see today are either residential or office buildings. I'll give you a little trick to help tell the difference. Balconies. If you see a bunch of balconies, you're probably looking at a residential building. If there aren't many balconies, you're probably looking at an office building. Straight ahead, the shorter brick building is the oldest building we'll talk about on the river today, the Fulton House. It's from 1898. It's originally a freezer for the meatpacking industry. They'd slaughter cattle in the stockyards around the city, bring them here to be frozen and shipped off on the train. Then in the 1970s, an architect named Harry Weiss oversaw a redesign to turn them into apartments. We put a bunch of holes into it for windows and balconies. Take a look at those balconies on the far left side of that brick building. The white space on the outside of those balconies shows you just how thick the walls that freezer were. They say when the meatpacking industry moved out in the 1970s, it took the Fulton House 6 months to thaw out. When they hollowed out those 4-foot thick walls, they found they'd been insulated with a mixture of cork and forced air. Straight ahead, this bridge sticking up in the air is the Carroll Street Railroad Bridge, 1908. This bridge is a landmark. It's no longer in use. We always leave it in the upright position, but it gives us a nice demonstration of how these movable bridges work. By a movable bridge, I mean they can raise. Chicago has the second most movable bridges of any city in the world, Amsterdam being number one. The technical term is a bascule trunnion bridge, fancy word for seesaw. On the back of the bridge, see the big concrete block, and it's the counterweight. When the block goes down, the bridge stands up. All 37 of our movable bridges have counterweights like that. Most of them are out of sight where you can't see them, but the Carroll Street Railroad Bridge, 1908, is kind of demonstrated. On your left, the sloped residences of the River Cottages, 1988. Their architect, Harry Weiss, was a big fan of sailing. The whole building is shaped like a sail. The circular windows like the portholes on a ship. Everyone thought Harry Weiss was crazy for this one, not just for the odd triangular shape of the building, but for the fact he wanted to put residences on the river at all. As recently as 1988, when these were built, the river was still industrial and smelly. Not a lot of people wanted to live by the river. In the long term, though, Harry Weiss was right. A few years ago, one of those 4 units sold for $2.25 million. The river is now some of the most sought-after real estate in the city. So, our captain's going to do a U-turn. This is a great little break. If you need to use the bathroom, stairs are at the back of the boat. Bathrooms are downstairs. Downstairs, you'll also find our bar. We got bottled water, soft drinks, alcohol, chips, pretzels, coffee, tea. It is a card-only bar, no cash. My name is Michael. I'll be doing a lap, making sure everybody can hear me all right. If you have any questions, need any recommendations, let me know. I'll be back on the mic after we turn around. Band. It was on this bridge when the bus driver decided to jettison the waste tanks. 800 pounds, or 360 kilograms of human wastewater fell through this bridge directly onto a tour boat. Yes, that is the appropriate response. Gasp of horror. Everybody was okay, medically. The bus driver was fired. The band was fined $200,000 by the city. The Dave Matthews Band donated an additional $100,000 to the Parks Department to, quote, begin the healing. My boss said I'm allowed to tell you that story on the condition I also tell you it was not one of our boats. People like hearing it was not one of our boats. We were talking about the Carroll Street Railroad Bridge on your left. It also sits on the historic spot that they first built the first footbridge across the river in the early 1800s, which was built to access a tavern. Let's get back into some architecture. Just past the brick building on your right here, this curving gray building, is the Riverbend Condominiums, 2003. You see on the front of that building curves in. Look ahead to the next glass building on the right, River Point. See on the front of that building curves out. Well, if you're into geometry, it's actually the same radius. Mathematically, the amount the first building curves in is the same amount the next building curves out. Another great example of contextualism. When they built that glass building, River Point, they acknowledged their context and they curved just like their neighbor. Both buildings are also imitating the curve of the Chicago River as well. There's a lot of different ways a building can flow with its context in contextualism. A style that started popping up in the 1980s, still very popular today. Keep an eye on that bridge straight ahead, the Lake Street Bridge. If you're lucky, we might get a nice photo op of an L train going over the top. Our public transit CTA trains are also known as the L train, short for elevated train, EL, because they're often elevated above the street. Perfect timing, there's that train I was looking for, got an L train straight ahead. You may have heard our downtown area referred to as the Loop. It's a reference to those L trains. They do a loop in the middle of downtown before heading back out to their respective branches. So we call that part of downtown the Loop. As we round the bend off to your left, you'll also have a lovely view of the main branch of the Chicago River. Great picture coming up on your left, facing east in the direction of Lake Michigan. In particular, I want to point out the skinny blue skyscraper in the back row. See the one that has a gap near the top? Put a pin in that. That's the St. Regis. We'll talk about why it has a gap later on. In the middle, the Marina City Corn Cob Towers. If you're a fan of the band Wilco, it was one of their album covers. Right behind the blue skyscraper with the pointy gray spire poking up is Trump Tower, second tallest building in Chicago. It's a good example of a spire, that gray thing poking up. Later on, we'll talk more about spires and how they count towards the heights of skyscrapers. And you probably noticed, on the right, there's a building with a Y-shaped foundation. See how it pinches together at the bottom? And why would you want to build a foundation like that? It's a tricky spot to put a skyscraper. That lot sat empty for many years because they had to find a way to fit a foundation in between two things. On the right side, there's Amtrak and Metro trains running underneath. On the left side, a city zoning law required them to leave 30 feet of space between the river and the front of the building for public access. The city wants people hanging out by the river. So they had to squeeze that foundation into only 20% of the lot space. The first full-size floor of that building is about 100 feet off the ground. Now, how do you do that safely? A lot of concrete. You ever see those rotating concrete trucks? It took about 500 concrete trucks to put the foundation for this building. It's called 150 North Riverside from 2017. And also just kind of a fun trick on a sunny day like today. If you look up in an angled glass, you're going to see a reflection of our boat. See if you can spot yourself in the reflection of the boat. Did you know skyscrapers are actually designed to sway in the breeze? We don't want them to sway too much. So in this tour, I'm going to tell you about 3 methods of sway reduction, how we calm down skyscrapers swaying in the breeze. The first method, you won't be able to see them, but on the top floor of this building to your right, there are 12 tanks holding 160,000 gallons of water. Basically, whenever the wind makes the building sway one way, all the water in those tanks on the top floor naturally sloshes the other way because of inertia. It helps reduce the amount of time it takes the building to settle. They're called tuned inertial slosh dampers, referring to the inertia of that water sloshing back and forth, stabilizing our skyscrapers in the Windy City. On your left, one of the newer additions to our skyline, the Bank of America building from 2020. This one cost around $800 million to construct. You see it's got these glass fins and steps running up the side. Those help shave off the wind step by step. And a very reflective glass. Get a real clear view of that blue sky bouncing off the front face. The Bank of America building had to deal with that same city's zoning law, requiring them to leave 30 feet of space between the river and the front of the building. You can see how they dealt with that with these tripod legs. Those steel I-beams lift the 3rd floor and beyond up off the ground so people can enjoy hanging out by the river. Now, like I said earlier, I call my tour a tour of time. So, it's convenient. The next 5 buildings on our right are going to be in chronological order. Let's go through some different phases of Chicago's architectural history. We'll start in the Roaring Twenties with another Art Deco building on your right to North Riverside. Much like the Arch next door with the Art Deco building, same year, 1929, same material, polished Indiana limestone. This is originally home to the Chicago Daily News. A lot of famous writers worked in this building, including Carl Sandburg and Joseph Robinson. Look at those columns along the bottom of the building. In between the tops of those columns, do you see those carvings? Those bas-reliefs tell the story of the written word, from hieroglyph to the Gutenberg printing press. Speaking of hieroglyphs, on the wall by the river, see those stone obelisks poking up, those stone pillars with the white lights around them? This is built right around the time they discovered King Tut's tomb, which got the trend in American architecture, including Egyptian elements like those obelisks. So that's Art Deco, fancy style from the Roaring Twenties. At the end of the Roaring Twenties, we had the Great Depression and then World War II. That's kind of a gap in our architectural record. We're not building a lot of new big buildings. So when we emerge in the post-war period, those experiences have changed our mindset. And so you get a new style called black box modernism. On your right, Gateway 1 from 1965 and Gateway 2 1967. Black box modernism is all about simplicity and efficiency. We got rid of the more decorative Art Deco style. Now we're just trying to be as efficient as possible. These are people that had lived through the Great Depression. They did not want to waste anything. The style was pioneered by a German architect, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, who led the Bauhaus School in Germany, came here and designed over 40 of Chicago skyscrapers. Once you start noticing these black box buildings, you'll see them all over town and all over the world. The most famous example of this style, black box modernism, is also the most famous building in Chicago. You can see the top corner to your left there, the Willis, formerly Sears Tower. We'll get a much better view of the Willis Tower on the way back, and I'll talk about it for a long time. Each of these black box buildings has 3 basic ingredients: skeleton, skin, and space. A skeleton is the steel frame on the inside that does most of the work holding up the building. Skin is the outside, it's what we call a curtain wall, as opposed to a load-bearing wall. Other buildings might have more stone or brick along the outside, bearing the load of the building. In this case, the steel skeleton on the inside does that, so the outside's more of a covering, what we call a curtain wall. Third ingredient is the space. These can be very serious-looking buildings. One thing that makes them more welcoming is they leave space around the outside of the building for an outdoor plaza. If you're ever on one of those plazas, the ground lines, the lines in the sidewalk, often line up exactly with the window frames. So we did Gateway 1 and 2 for the 1960s. This next white box ahead on the right is Gateway 3, 1971. So we're moving along in time and getting a little bit more decorative. Now it's not just a steel box. Now we cover the outside with this precast sandy concrete. Gateway 3 is built to what's called the International Style. The idea they're going for here is you could put this building in any city in the world, and it would fit in. Picture that building in your hometown. Would it fit in? And then ahead on the right, that curving glass building is Gateway 4, 1883. So now it's the 1980s. We're ready to show off again, and now we can show off by curving our glass. Just like the river curves, another great example of contextualism, flowing with their context. Also, I just think this is funny. On the right, you got a fitness center right next to a bakery. One is a place I push my body to the limit every morning, and the other one is a fitness center. This next black box here, that's called 300 South Wacker. Now, we actually did not used to talk about this building very much on the tour. It used to be kind of just another black box, one of many in Chicago. That is, until a few years ago, the owners of the building spent $800,000 to put a giant map on the side of the building. About halfway up, see that red Lego brick? That represents this building. See the river beside it? Basically a giant "You Are Here" sign. They put themselves on the map and putting a map on themselves. Any fans of Batman might recognize this next stone building ahead on the right in the movie The Dark Knight. That was Gotham City Bank. The heist at the beginning of The Dark Knight with the school buses was filmed right there. The Joker and his headband took zip lines in that glass building Gateway 4 onto the roof of that stone building, which is actually the old Main Post Office, 1832. At the time of its completion, this was the largest post office in the world. Why did Chicago need such a big post office? It used to be a major hub for mail order catalogs. If you ever ordered something from a Sears catalog back in the day, it's a good chance it was processed in this building. In 2016, some developers spent $900 million turning into offices. Turned the roof of this building into a 3-acre park called the Meadow. There are basketball courts up on that roof, walking trails, pickleball courts on the roof of the old post office. And notice this road, the expressway, goes right underneath the post office. That's another feature of the Burnham Plan. Way back in 1909, they said one day we'll need a road right about here. So when they built the post office in the late 1920s, they left a gap underneath for that road. This expressway was built under the post office in the 1950s. It's a real long-term plan. Now, this next stretch of the river is story time. The story I'm going to tell you is called The Four Stars of Chicago. Alternate title, That Time We Accused a Cow of Arson. Now, it's a long story, and to tell it, I need to take a long sip of water. If you're downstairs, I just did a really good physical gag where I took an exaggerated long sip of water, and everybody up here loved it. Alright, the four stars of Chicago, or That Time We Accused a Cow of Arson. We'll start with the Chicago flag. We got a city flag, here it is. Let's talk about what the Chicago flag means. The two blue stripes in the Chicago flag represent the Chicago River and Lake Michigan. The three white sections represent the three sides of the city. The south side, the west side, and the north side. On the east side, you have Lake Michigan. The two yellow dots, that's mustard. It's my bad. The four red stars represent significant moments in Chicago's history. The four F's. The fort, the fire, the fair, the fair. First star is the fort. Fort Dearborn, the original settlement. We'll point out its original site later on. Second star is the fire. We get a time machine. Let's go there now. It's October 8, 1871. The city is dry. We've not had a drop of rain for 14 straight weeks. The city is also wooded. Some of our streets and sidewalks are even made of wood. The river back then was so polluted and oily, parts of the river itself were flammable. To top it all off on a day, October 8, 1871, we have wind up to 30 miles an hour. This is a bad combination. When about 4 blocks to the right, or to the west of where we are right now, a fire breaks out in Miss Catherine O'Leary's barn. Quickly gets across the river and burns through 4 miles of the city north. Let's jump ahead about 30 hours to when the fire finally burns out. It has destroyed around 18,000 buildings. More than 100,000 people lost their homes. More than 300 people lost their lives. One of the biggest urban fires ever, burned down about 1/3 of the city. Now, people want answers. Rumors are going around, because we know where the fire started. We don't know how. The most popular rumor you find in a newspaper. They say there was a cow in the barn that kicked over a lantern, started the fire. Which kind of makes sense when you think about it. Chicago was the meatpacking capital of the world. Maybe some cow finally got grass fed up, decided to take matters into her own hooves and settle her beef once and for all. Yeah, I know the cow jokes are cheesy. I'll try not to milk it. Thank you, one guy. That's pretty good. I'd say on the whole, those jokes work about 2% of the time. So. All right, let's skim ahead. We rebuild quickly. Mayfair, Chicago is called the second city, and that's partly because the first one burned down. It's basically their second attempt at building Chicago. We rebuilt so quickly that barely 20 years after the fire, we win a bid to host the World's Fair of 1893. That's your third star in the Chicago flag, the Fair. The World's Fair was a huge deal. At the time, the population of Chicago was around 1 million. The fair had 27 million visitors who saw things they had never seen before, including zippers were introduced at that World's Fair. Spray paint, chocolate brownies, popcorn popping machines, dishwashing machines, those machines that flattened pennies. Pabst awarded itself a blue ribbon. The most impressive part was a campus down by the lake called the White City. 12 massive white buildings built by an all-star team of American architects. One of those buildings actually still stands today. It's now the Museum of Science and Industry. The World's Fair was overseen by an architect named Daniel Burnham. He did such a good job, they said, okay, Daniel, plan Chicago. That's how we get the Burnham Plan of 1909, which is how today we enjoy our Riverwalk and public access lakefront. Years later, we'd host another World's Fair, your fourth star on the Chicago flag. This fair was impressive because it was in 1933, right in the middle of the Great Depression, but despite that, it was still so successful, they ran it for a second consecutive summer. 4 blocks to the right, there's a radio tower. See that radio tower just to the right of that parking garage off in the distance? That radio tower off in the distance is at the Chicago Fire Academy. They built it in 1956, and to this day it's where Chicago trains firefighters. You see that radio tower way off in the distance? That is also the exact former location of Miss Catherine O'Leary's farm, where the fire started, where we accused the cow of arson, and it's now where we train firefighters. So, our academy's going to do another U-turn, another great break. Use the stairs at the back of the boat. Visit the bar or bathrooms downstairs. My name is Michael. If you have any questions, one question I get a lot is, what's that? On the right with the 2 big smokestacks, it's the old Union Station power plant. It's a coal plant from the 1930s. It's been out of use since 2011. It's still pretty cool to look at one of our old power plants from the 1930s. My name is Michael. If you have any other questions, I'll be back on the mic after we turn around. A little follow-up on the fire. We'll never know for sure what started the Great Chicago Fire because years later, the newspaper editor who wrote the story about a cow kicking over a lantern, on his deathbed, he admitted he made it up. There's another fire on the same day in Peshtigo, Wisconsin. They said around 300 people died in the Chicago Fire. Around 2,000 people died in the Peshtigo Fire. The less famous, more deadly fire that happened on the same day in Peshtigo, Wisconsin. The fact that these and a few other fires across the country all happened on the same day leads some people to theorize they may have been caused by the same meteor shower. But we'll never know for sure. On your right, this curving building is River City, 1986. Remember Marina City? Those corncob towers we talked about earlier? Same architect, Bertrand Goldberg. You can see the resemblance. Once again, it's a rounded, natural design on a multi-use building. Apartments above, daycare below, and underneath the marina to parking your boats. They actually have bubblers in the water down there to keep the water moving during the winter so it does not freeze from the holes in those boats. River City is kind of shaped like a giant S. There are some advantages to that serpentine design. There's balconies on the inside curve of the S. They have a unique advantage. The way the building curves shelters those balconies from the wind. You probably heard Chicago's called the Windy City. It's partly because it is windy here, but the reason that nickname got famous is from when we were trying to get the World's Fair of 1893. New York also wanted the World's Fair. There was a rivalry going on. So when a New York Times writer heard our spokesman talking about how great Chicago is, he called them those windbags from that Windy City. It started as an insult. Now it's our whole brand. And for the tallest building in the Windy City, it's straight ahead. The black skyscraper with the 2 big antennae is the Willis, formerly Sears Tower, the tallest building in Chicago. We'll talk about that long building at length, but first, I want to talk about the building right in front of us. The pink granite building with the blue crowns at the top is 311 South Wacker from 1990. Those blue crowns at the top are LED lights. Around sunset every night, those lights turn on bright white. They realized those lights were so bright, it was confusing migrating birds who thought that was the moon. So they worked with scientists to figure out what months of the year birds are mostly migrating through, and during that time they do a dimmer version of the lights on top of 311 South Wacker, so you don't have confused birds whacking into the building. Scan the horizon over to the right to see a pointy roof with a gray statue sticking out at the top. See that gray statue on the horizon? Her name is Ceres. She's the Roman goddess of agriculture and grain, so we get the word cereal. The reason the Roman goddess of agriculture is on top of that building is because that's where we used to trade agricultural futures for buying or selling stocks and various crops and livestock. All that stock trading happened right there in the Chicago Board of Trade. Another Art Deco building from the end of the Roaring Twenties, made of polished Indiana limestone. That was the tallest building in Chicago from 1830 until 1965. In the foreground, see this black rectangle with all the gray balconies? It's 235 West Van Buren from 2010. What they were going for here is they wanted those gray balconies to imitate traffic on the road below when viewed from above. See how the short gray balconies kind of look like cars? The long ones look like semi-trucks? So that way residents can come home from a long day of sitting in traffic and sit in traffic. And now, the Willis, formerly Sears Tower, the black skyscraper straight ahead, is the tallest building in Chicago, and it was completed in 1974. It was the tallest building in the world. Tallest building in the world for 24 years, until 1998. How tall is it? 1,451 feet, or 442 meters, 110 floors. Still the tallest building in Chicago today is the 3rd tallest building in the United States. Second tallest building in America is the Central Park Tower in New York, and the tallest building in America is the One World Trade Center in New York. However, If you were to put the One World Trade Center side by side with the Willis Tower, roof to roof, the Willis Tower is 83 feet tall. So roof-wise, still easily the tallest building in America. However, see the antenna on top of Willis Tower? Those communication antennae are not considered structural, so they do not count towards the official height. Whereas the One World Trade Center in New York has a very tall spire that does count towards the height, so they got us on a technicality. Well played, New York. The decision about what counts towards the official height was made by a real governing body called the Council on Tall Buildings. Now, when you are the tallest building in the Windy City, you gotta deal with a lot of wind. Here's what we talk about our second method of sway reduction, how we calm down skyscrapers swaying in the breeze. The Willis Tower uses a method called bundled columns. Look at the shape of the Willis Tower. It's essentially 9 towers, or columns, grouped together. As you work to break the building, fewer and fewer of those columns continue. Only 2 of the columns go to the building's full height, so they can lean together and resist the wind from any direction. The story behind this design, the building's lead architect was having dinner with his chief engineer, Fazlur Khan, and there were cigarettes on the table. He realized if he stacked the cigarettes end to end, they were weaker, but if you bundled them together at the base, they were stronger. That's how you get the Sears Tower, a building based on cigarettes. Let's talk about the name. Called the Sears Tower, called it the Willis Tower. It was originally built as the Sears Tower. Had that name for many years till the lease on the naming rights expired around the time of the '08 crash and was won by Willis, an insurance brokerage company that occupies 3 floors out of the 110 floors today. Most Chicago locals still call it the Sears Tower out of nostalgia. And this is my favorite part of the tour. Did you know 2 people have actually climbed the Sears Tower? The first was in 1980. A local named Dan Goodwin climbed it with suction cups while wearing a homemade Spider-Man costume. They called him Spider Dan. Second person to climb the Sears Tower was in 1999. A Frenchman named Alain Robert climbed the Sears Tower in 1 hour and 20 minutes with no equipment. No ropes. He just wedged his hands into the window frames and free solo climbed the Sears Tower. That's a great question. Sometimes people ask how we got back down. They got arrested. They took the elevators. It's technically trespassing. It's just the coolest possible trespassing. You can visit the top of the Willis Tower via the sky deck. You can see part of it. There's 5 glass boxes sticking out of the side. See the people move around in there? That's called the ledge. If you're brave, you can walk out into one of those glass floor boxes and look straight down between your feet, over 1,000 feet straight down. Through this next gap to your right, you'll see the full height of the Sears Willis Tower. Today would be a perfect day to visit the sky deck. They say on a clear day like today, from the top of the Willis Tower, you can actually see 4 states: Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Now, obviously, you can't see exactly where those state borders are, so help you out. If you see corn, that's Indiana. If you see cows, that's Wisconsin. If you see somebody drinking a craft beer and resenting Ohio for no reason, that's Michigan. Earlier, we were talking about those antennae on top of Willis Tower, the communication antenna for radio, cell tower, that kind of thing. Those antennae might not have looked that tall. It's really just because they're so far away. You know, they're over 1,000 feet off the ground. It's a matter of perspective. To give you a frame of reference, the antennae on top of Willis Tower are about the same height as Gateway 2, this black box building on your left. That's how tall the antennae are on top of Willis Tower, about 280 feet. Underneath the building to your left, you can see one of those Amtrak trains I was talking about earlier. There's a bunch of train tracks under there that connect to Union Station. Union Station is a gorgeous, great hall. If you get a chance to walk in there, definitely check that out. Now, all these buildings on the left that sit above those train tracks, they rent the air from the train companies. Technically, Amtrak and Metro own all the air directly above their train tracks as far as the eye can see. So these buildings pay rent to just exist in that air. It's called air rights. Let's go on the right. Up in the air, we'll take a look at the corners of these 2 brown towers on the right. Now, so the corners are kind of jagged, Minecraft looking. Well, this is an office building, and the most popular type of office is the corner office. So they made more corners. Every floor of both these 2 towers has 16 corner offices. This is the Chicago Mercantile Exchange from 1983. It's a big stock trading building. This section in the middle is originally a huge room where they would trade stocks using hand signals. It's called line of sight trading. Today it's all done with computers. As you can see, they have a nice riverfront patio. The goal for the city is to make as much of the river walkable as possible. It's going to be tough to do, though, because a lot of our older buildings don't leave any space beside the river. That's because the way we use the river has changed over time. Today it's more recreational, tourism, and dining. Back in the day, we thought of the river more like a back alley. For sewage and shipping, not a nice place to sit and have lunch. So, a lot of our older buildings have their back turned on the river. Great example of that is this next huge stone building on your right from 1929, the Civic Opera Building. Another Art Deco building from the end of the Roaring 20s. Was first opened 2 weeks after the great stock market crash. The idea was to rent out the 2 towers on either side as office space and use that money to fund the opera in the middle. See the inscription on the wall? You may notice it appears to say Civic Opera Building. That's not a typo. They just use the original Latin alphabet, which has no letter U. It's the second largest opera auditorium in America. It seats 3,600 people. Chicago has a lot of great theater. We're also famous for our comedy scene. Improv was invented here. If you've ever seen shows like Whose Line Is It Anyway? And a lot of the famous comedians you know today got their start here. You know, Bill Murray, Tina Fey, Michael Ribbons. That's me. All got their start right here in Chicago. If you need recommendations for a comedy show, just ask me during a break. Tons of funny shows here in Chicago any night of the week, but especially on the weekend. Sometimes architects are also funny. I'll give you an example on your left. This long glass rectangle that then goes straight up is the Boeing Building 1990. Now, this one was originally built for the Morton Salt Company. It was built for a salt company. So look way up on the roof. There's a big gray panel. They put 6 holes into it, which makes the building look like a giant salt shaker. Speaking of salt, let's talk about Chicago food. Shout it out if you know it. What is the most famous Chicago food? I heard pizza, I heard hot dog. It's a pretty close one, too. Number one, I'd probably say our deep dish pizza. First, my favorite place for deep dish is called La Briola. Super close to where the tour ends. If you need me to spell it, just ask during a break. I actually saw it on a Chicago pizza tour. It's another fun tour. You get a slice of 4 different pizza restaurants downtown. Someone already said the second most famous Chicago food is Chicago-style hot dog. They put a bunch of different toppings on there. Does anyone know the one thing you do not get on a Chicago dog? Ketchup, that's right. Smart vote. A+. It's a big point of civic pride for us, not having ketchup on our hot dogs. If you ask for ketchup on a Chicago dog, you're looking at 5-10 years prison time minimum. Nah, I'm just kidding. I'm from Virginia. I really don't care. On your right, this brick building is the Great Lakes Building, 1910. If we took our time machine back between 1910 and 1920, this is what a lot of the buildings on the river would have looked like. These wide brick warehouses. The building that was here before this, in the same spot, was an old wooden gathering hall called the Wigwam, which is where Abraham Lincoln was nominated for president. So this is the spot on Earth. Abraham Lincoln was nominated for president in the building that was here previously. We are back at Wolf Point. We are leaving the south branch of the Chicago River, running right into the main branch and start heading east in the direction of Lake Michigan. This patch of grass to your right is the end of the official River Walk. River Walk goes all the way from right there to Navy Pier. Now by the lake, we'll see Navy Pier later on. Directly to the right, this curving blue glass skyscraper is the Union Building, 1983. Great early example of contextualism. It was the first one here at Wolf Point to curve like a river. The 2 alternating colors of blue glass imitate the river and the sky. Also, have you seen the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off? That was Ferris's dad's office. On the side of that building, it says Ferris Bueller and the parade. Straight ahead now, that huge stone building is the Merchandise Mart. It is gigantic. When it was completed in 1929, it was the largest building in the world. It held that title till they built the Pentagon. There are over 73 American football fields worth of office space in that building, 4.2 million square feet, 7 miles or 10 kilometers of hallways, all within the Merchandise Mart. It was originally an apartment warehouse. Now where you would go to buy a couch is where your department store would go to buy 5,000 couches. Merchandise Mart is so big, it used to have its own zip code, its own postal code. It just meant that building, the Merchandise Mart. It's basically 2 full city blocks. Now, we talked about how this Art Deco style was all about optimism, about what we could do with machines. But I wonder if they could have ever imagined we would one day have the technology to use the whole 2.5-acre front face of that building as a giant projector screen. It's called Art on the Mart. It's a free show they do on the weekends, so they'll do it tonight. From 7:30 to 8 p.m., they project art videos across the river, covering the whole front face of the Merchandise Mart. It is the world's largest projected public art display, and it's free tonight at 7:30 p.m. Art on the Mart. They play music with it as well, and they change the show throughout the season. If you come back in a month or so, you'll see a totally different show for Art on the Mart. Best place to watch Art on the Mart is this section of the Riverwalk up here on your right. You'll be able to see those projectors I was talking about. See the big gray box on the wall to your right with the glass in front of it? Those are projectors for Art on the Mart. Those projectors cost around $8 million. They're perfectly calibrated, shine everywhere except for the windows. This is still an office building, and if you're working late, you don't want to get blasted by those projectors. You can see some folks fishing right here. In the water to your right, those floating green garden beds are called fish hotels. They leave their roots hang down into the water and encourage marine life. Fish As recently as the 1970s, there were only 10 species of fish that could survive in the Chicago River. Today there are over 70 species of fish in the Chicago River. It's gotten a lot cleaner, partially due to cleanup efforts by organizations like Friends of the Chicago River, but also due to the fact a lot of factories have moved elsewhere. Today it's more apartment and office buildings in the river, which don't put as much junk into the water. And the river has gotten so clean that about a week ago they actually did the first river swim here in the Chicago River. That's happened in over 100 years, although it's still not recommended for the public to just jump in the river. They were closely monitoring the river that day to make sure it's clean enough. Because when it rains, stuff just goes away. Now this next tourist river is the site of one of our city's greatest tragedies. You might not have heard of it. So after the Titanic sank in 1912, they passed a law called lifeboats for all. They wanted to make sure every boat had enough lifeboats. So 3 years later, in 1915, there was a steamship called the Eastland docked up ahead here, designed to hold 6 lifeboats. It now had 11. And they added those bulky lifeboats to the top deck of an already top-heavy ship. And over 1,000 people got aboard for company outing. They went to one side of the boat to take a picture. The boat rolled over onto its side. Horrified onlookers rushed to pull people out of the water. There'd been a man who was contemplating suicide at the edge of the river. He actually jumped in and started saving lives. Then he turned this brick building on your left into a makeshift hospital. It's the Reed Murdoch Center from 1914. And he had 844 passengers lost their lives. It is the worst shipwreck in the history of the Great Lakes. And it happened right there in downtown Chicago. Oddly enough, the Eastland disaster of 1915 had a ripple effect on Chicago sports. A 20-year-old George Hallis was supposed to be on the Eastland, but he was late and missed it. He went on to found the Chicago Bears, our NFL football team. Chicago's a great sports town. Probably heard of our NBA basketball team, the Chicago Bulls. They've had many legendary players, including Michael Jordan and Carlos Boozer. Also, 2 Major League Baseball teams, the White Sox, play on the south side. They shoot off fireworks every time they hit a home run. So there's rarely fireworks. Chicago Cubs play historic Wrigley Field. It's another great tour if you get a chance. My roommate is actually a tour guide at Wrigley Field. So you take a tour of Wrigley Field, you have a tour guide named James with a beard. Tip him well. He's the reason I have Disney Plus. Speaking of TV, this black and gray building on your right is the Leo Burnett from 1989. If you're a fan of the show Mad Men, the show is probably based on the advertising firm that worked in there. Leo Burnett. They created many beloved advertising characters, including the Jolly Green Giant, Toucan Sam, Pillsbury Doughboy, and Tony the Tiger, all created by the company that works right in there. About 1/3 of the way up, see that dark belt that looks different on the corners? It's no coincidence, it's the same height as the roof of 55 West Wacker to the right. It's 1989, staying low to 1968. We got skyscrapers waving hello to each other, all across the city, across time. Time. One of my favorites. I think we got good sunshine time for it. Straight ahead, see those vertical white letters that say Morton's the Steakhouse? All the straight. Do you see it there? Green, shiny, golden tip. Yeah, the sun's hitting that golden tip perfectly on the Carbide and Carbon building, 1929. 1929 was right in the middle of Prohibition, the period of American history where it was against the law to produce or distribute alcohol. Prohibition was not very popular here in Chicago. In fact, right in the middle of Prohibition, in a little subtle act of silent protest, we built a giant champagne bottle. See, it's green just like a bottle, and the gold in the top looks like the foil on a bottle of champagne. It is real gold up there. The gold is very thin. It's even thinner than surrender. You may have noticed on our first pass into the State Street Bridge is currently a decent-sized hole in the bridge. They took that out to do some repairs. Like I said, the average age of our downtown bridges is 85 years old. So every once in a while, they need some parts swapped out. Straight ahead, there's a cluster of 4 buildings side by side. The 2 on the left are the London House, which is the second best rooftop bar in the country. It'll be a beautiful day for that. Just to the right of it, the skinny stone rocket ship-shaped building is the Mather Tower, 1928. Mather Tower, skinniest skyscraper in downtown Chicago. The top floor is just 9 feet across. See the white cap at the very top? It's a different color. The whole cap was replaced in the early 2000s. They built the replacement off-site and flew the whole white cap up there via helicopter. The black box to your left is AMA Plaza, 1972. It is the last and tallest design of Mies van der Rohe. Pioneer of the black box style, this was his last design, completed shortly after his passing in 1972. Remember we talked about the White Clock Tower straight ahead? We started off with the Wrigley building. We talked about how it's an office building made to look like a cathedral. The same is true for the building just to the right of it. Straight ahead, see those white letters that say Chicago Tribune on the Tribune Tower, 1925. In this case, it was the offices of a newspaper, Chicago Tribune, but it's modeled after the Rouen Cathedral in France, a style called French Gothic Revival. Most famous example of Gothic architecture would be the Cathedral Notre Dame. Similar design here, but on a building for a newspaper. Near the top of the Tribune Tower, you'll see skinny stone towers connected by arches. Those are really decorative. Nothing in those stone towers called flying buttresses, a feature of Gothic architecture. The newspaper moved out of the building in 2018. Today it is high-end apartments. It's been designated a landmark building, which means they cannot change the outside of the building unless it is too restored. The Tribune Tower also has a collection of rare materials and famous landmarks. They have a piece of the Great Wall of China, the Pyramids of Giza, the Alamo, which some of you might remember. Those pieces are just stuck in the outside. You can walk by Tribune Tower and check them out. Now, one of my favorite fun facts of the tour is going to be on your left. In between the Wrigley Building, 1924, and Tribune Tower, 1925, you'll see a building from 1926 with a round yellow dome, the Intercontinental Hotel. See that yellow dome through the gap to your left? My favorite fact about that building is a little stone tower open up behind the yellow dome. That was originally intended as a place to dock your blimp. They thought in the future we'd all be taking a rigid airship to work, or Zeppelin, so they made a parking spot for blimps. Unfortunately, a blimp has never parked out. Right after they built that, the Hindenburg disaster happened. An infamous blimp explosion, and blimps got a lot less parking. On your left, that glass building is the Apple Store from 2017. It actually sits in the historic site. The first non-native settler set up a trading post. In the 1780s, an explorer from Haiti named Jean-Baptiste Fongasava moved here and married Kitty Howard, daughter of a Native American chief. Her connections to the local tribes allowed them to set up a trading post right over there, which at the time was actually the mouth of the Chicago River. In fact, the street we just went under is called Michigan Avenue. It's roughly the original edge of Lake Michigan. All this land you see in front of you is man-made. It sits on landfill. What's even crazier, some of that landfill is even rubble from the Great Chicago Fire. When 18,000 buildings got destroyed, it's a lot of raw material. We just pushed it out onto the lake and made more land. Also, Fort Dearborn, the first red star on the Chicago flag, is right around this area as well. There's actually plaques in the sidewalk to show the outline of that original fort. Next, we're going to look on the right. In the back row, you'll see a white skyscraper with straight up and down vertical lines. The Aon Center has a bit of a troubled past. It was completed in 1973. That white skyscraper in the back row is the tallest building in Chicago. For 1 year, then they finished the Sears Tower. That was a bummer. Also, they originally covered the outside of the building with rare Italian marble. The marble could not handle Chicago winters. The temperature change made the marble start to crack and fall off. A chunk of marble even hit the point of the building to the right of it, to a Greenwich Plaza. So they had to strip all that marble off and replace it with granite from North Carolina. That process cost half as much as the entire building did in the first place. Today, the Aon Center is the fourth tallest building in Chicago. On your right, Oktoberfest. And behind it, in the second row, you see a building with wavy white balconies, Aqua Tower from 2009. The idea is those wavy balconies in the second row imitate the rugged limestone outcroppings in the Great Lakes area. When it was completed in 2009, Aqua Tower with the wavy balconies was the tallest building in the world, designed by woman-led architecture firm, Studio Gang, led by Chicagoland architect Jeannie Gang. She's a Harvard graduate. She's one of my Harvard Genius Grant. She's currently working on an $8 billion renovation of the O'Hare Airport. And Jeannie Gang is also the reason Aqua Tower is no longer the tallest building in the world, designed by a woman, because she designed an even taller one. And it's on your right, my favorite building in Chicago. That three-level blue glass skyscraper is the St. Regis 2021. St. Regis, third tallest building in Chicago, tallest building in the world, designed by a woman architect. Here's where we talk about our third method of sway reduction. Near the top of that tallest tower, see that gap? It's called a blow-through floor. The idea is wind can take a shortcut through that gap, take some of the pressure off the tallest part of the building. That blow-through floor was not in the original plans for the St. Regis. Around the time they started construction, they did some more small-scale tests and realized they needed more help with the wind. So they just never built floors 83 and 84, which is a bummer for the developers because many of those other floors sold for millions of dollars as high-end apartments. Like one of the penthouse units, the top two floors, that middle tower, sold for about $20 million. One of the biggest sales in Chicago's history. And I'm pretty happy with my purchase. Thank you for not laughing. That means you believe me. That's cool. St. Regis made of 6 different shades of blue glass. Notice how that blue glass gets darker where the building gets narrower and lighter where the building gets wider. Look at the edge of the building. It's got a wavy shape to it. Kind of fits with their aquatic motif, referring to the Chicago River and Lake Michigan nearby. Speaking of aquatic motifs, on your left, the Centennial Fountain and Water Cannon from 1989 celebrates the 100-year anniversary of the sanitary district to clean the water for Chicago. Also celebrates the reversal of the Chicago River, which we'll talk about later on. Remember Mies van der Rohe with the black box style? This fountain was designed by one of his grandsons, Peter Lohan. Off in the distance to your left, you see the top of the Ferris wheel on Navy Pier. Did you know the world's first Ferris wheel ever was actually at our World's Fair of 1893? The original Ferris wheel from the 1800s was way larger than the one you're looking at now. It was 5 stories taller than that. Every car was a converted train car, holding around 2,000 people. Today's Ferris wheel is sitting on Navy Pier. Navy Pier was built in 1916. It wasn't always the fun place it is today. It's been a military base. During World War II, they trained pilots from the base on Navy Pier. You can see the construction with the yellow crane here to your left. That's going to be 2 new residential buildings. The first one is set to be complete in 2027. This is the original proposed site for the Spire. It's going to be a super tall skyscraper, and they dug a hole in preparation for it, and then the money fell apart. And so for a long time, it was just a big hole sitting right next to Lakeshore Drive. So we're excited to see something popping up in the original site for the Spire. The last skyscraper on the left is a 3-sided black skyscraper, Lake Point Tower, 1968. Some people think it looks like a flask. Some people think it looks like a fidget spinner. Notice it's standing all by itself. It's actually the only skyscraper on the lakeside of that road. The famous DuSable Lakeshore Drive runs down the edge of Lake Michigan. And the lakefront is supposed to be public access. A lot of parks and beaches, not skyscrapers. But in the late 60s, those developers found a zoning loophole that allowed them to build those fancy apartments. That loophole has since been closed. This will remain the only skyscraper on the lakeside by DuSable Lakeshore Drive. There have been a lot of rumors over the years about famous people that supposedly had apartments in there, including Tom Cruise, Scottie Pippen, and Halle Berry. Now, I cannot confirm whether or not those rumors are true, because Halle Berry refuses to answer my DMs. So, who knows? After this bridge, we'll take our final turn of the trip. This will be your photo break. Record to stay for pictures. While we're taking pictures, do not stand in the chairs, do not lean out over the railings. Last call for the bathroom. Good time to visit the bar as well. After we take our photo break, I'll get back on the mic and finish up the last 5 minutes of the tour. But for now, feel free to get up, walk around, enjoy your photo break. My name is Michael. Have any questions? We call it Lake Michigan, and we call this land Chicagoa, which roughly translates to stinky onion. That's true. This area was a wetland, a lot of onion-type plants called leaves. If you had been here years before there was ever a city, the Chicago River, where we're on right now, would have looked a lot different. Originally, the Chicago River was only about 4 feet wide, 2 feet deep, and it flowed into Lake Michigan. Today, the river is about 100 feet, or 30 meters wide, and 20 feet, or 6 meters deep, and it flows out of the lake. How did that happen? Well, in the late 1800s, Chicago was the fastest growing city in the world. We were all using the river as a sewer. All that industrial runoff would go into the river and flow out into Lake Michigan. The problem with that, Lake Michigan is where we get our drinking water. It started causing outbreaks of waterborne diseases like cholera. We had to do something about it. So in the late 1800s, we made an ambitious plan to reverse the direction of the entire river. We dug a series of canals to the south and west that connected the Des Plaines River to the Illinois River to the Mississippi River, all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. It took 3 years of planning, 8 years of digging. The Army Corps of Engineers helped out. They moved more dirt than they moved for the Panama Canal. In the year 1900, we successfully completed our project to reverse the direction of the Chicago River, an event which is celebrated by the Centennial Fountain to your right. It is the only river in the world that can artificially grow ocean. I know on this tour I've thrown a lot of information at you. I know it's a lot to take in. So what I want to do to wrap things up is give you a chronological time lapse of the entire history of Chicago's architecture in 2 minutes. Ready? Here we go. Hop back in the time machine. We hit rewind. So there's nothing here but giant glaciers. We hit fast forward. Centuries of Native Americans live and trade here to the 1780s when DuSable and Kittihawa set up their trading post, where the Apple Store is today. Then we have Fort Dearborn around the same area. The city grows quickly. It's made out of wood. 1871, Great Chicago Fire. We rebuild. Host the World's Fair of 1893. What's now the Museum of Science and Industry pops up. In the year 1900, we reverse the direction of the Chicago River. 1908, the Chicago Cubs win the World Series. I'll tell you when it happens again. It's not soon. 1916, Navy Pier. Early 1920s, office buildings that look like cathedrals, like the Wrigley Building. Late 1920s, that's Art Deco with the Merchandise Mart. Until the roaring 20s come to a roaring halt with the Great Depression. And World War II looks like our time lapse is frozen for about 20 years. No new big buildings because we're busy being Great Depressed and fighting in World War II. For the rest of the 50s and 60s, you have black box modernism, culminating in the biggest black box of all, the Sears Tower, 1974. For the rest of the 70s and 80s, the river's still industrial and smelly, but that would change in the 90s and early 2000s as the river gets cleaner and more residential buildings on the Chicago River, like 2009, Trump Tower, second tallest building in Chicago. 2012, I visited Chicago for the first time on a high school field trip. Take this river tour, and the city would never be the same. 2016, the Chicago Cubs finally win another World Series. 2021, the St. Regis, third tallest building in Chicago, tallest building in the world, designed by a woman architect. And on our time lapse goes until about 74 minutes ago, when an incredibly intelligent group of passengers got on a boat to listen to a guy with a mustache point at buildings. So, here's how it's going to work. As we pull into the dock, there will be a bump. We hit the wall, so let's go to please take a seat. Remain seated. The captain will tell you when it's okay to stand up. Now's a great time to look around. Make sure you don't leave anything behind. Any hats, bags, kids, take them with you. Got any trash? There will be a bin next to ramps. Appreciate helping us keep our boat clean. Our crew in orange needs plenty of room to drag the ramp onto the boat. Given the space to do so, do not crowd the ramp. I'll be the first one off the boat. I'll be at the top of the stairs. If you have any questions, need any recommendations, let me know. Please grab one of these cards, which have my Venmo and comedy stuff on them. And of course, if you feel like I did a great job, be happy to accept any tips as well. On behalf of our captain, crew, bartender, my name is Michael. We'd like to thank you.